welcome to this new video for my channel, The Mental Traveler. I'm very happy because today I'm going to be reviewing the second season of The Crown, which is my favorite Netflix show ever, and I'll be telling you why later on. The Crown is a series dealing with the life of Queen Elizabeth II, the current Queen of England and the Commonwealth, and each season covers around 10 years. Season 1 dealt with events that happened in the 30s, but basically focused on the late 40s and the early 50s, and so Season 2 starts where Season 1 ended around 1955, and then it ends around 1964. Peter Morgan is sort of like the man behind The Crown. He also wrote the script for The Queen, which is a 2006 movie dealing with Queen Elizabeth II around the time when Princess Diana died, and he also created this play called The Audience regarding these weekly meetings between the Queen and her prime ministers along the years. But anyways, The Crown was released on December 6, 2017, and it stars Claire Foy, Vanessa Kirby, Matt Smith, Jeremy Northam, Victoria Hamilton, Greg Wise, Alex Jennings, Anton Lesser, Matthew Good, among many more. This season had, as the previous one, 10 episodes running around an hour each. And well, before I begin, let me just warn you that this will be a video full with spoilers. So if you haven't seen the first season and the second one of The Crown, and maybe if you don't really know that much about what comes later on in the life of the people involved, you should beware. Okay, so I've been a big fan of the British royal family since I was around 16, 17, which is why I am a royalist, and in part why I am an Anglophile. For years, I only ever really cared about Queen Victoria and her grandson George V and his sons Edward VIII and George VI, cause I'm not that interested in what happens in history after World War II. So I read biographies, novels, historical fiction, watched documentaries, TV series, movies about this royal family, and when I was 18 I even drew a family tree of them dating back to the late 1700s, and I posted it on my bedroom wall and it's still there. But then thankfully The Crown came along and it showed me that I was missing quite a lot of cool stuff regarding Queen Elizabeth II, her son Prince Charles, and his sons Prince William and Prince Harry. So I'm really thankful to this series because not only have I found it a fascinating history lesson, but I've become even more fond of Queen Elizabeth II and her descendants. Although I think that for me my biggest surprise was Princess Margaret, because before The Crown I only had like this vague idea about her being really wild, having troubles with alcohol, and having died before her mother did. Then The Crown came along and I completely fell for Princess Margaret, her love story with Peter Townsend from Season 1. It was just like, whoa, I loved it. And in the year between Season 1 and Season 2 I've done a lot of research of her first 30 years of life, and after that I sort of know what happens to her, but I don't want to get like any of the messy details until I see them portrayed in The Crown in later seasons. I just think it would be a bit painful to see how much she suffered along the way, in part due to the whole doomed tragic love affair with Peter Townsend, that outcome of that. But until Season 3 airs, I would rather just with my memories of her having once been a very innocent, lively, exciting, happy young woman. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, Season 2 covers events that take place between 1955 and 1964, or thereabouts. We get an idea of what's going on in the world as well as what's happening with the Windsor family. Worldwide, we get a glimpse of the marriage between Jackie Kennedy and JFK, but I also learned about the Suez Crisis of 1956, as well as learning that around this time the Soviets wanted to sort of take control of Ghana and draw it away from Commonwealth. But just as in Season 1, we get a lot of flashbacks, and this was a turn for Prince Philip. We learned quite a lot about his childhood around the time of World War II, and also focusing on this time we get to see what Edward VIII was doing after he had abdicated to Mary Welly Simpson. We see him being a Nazi sympathizer, and then on a more personal note we keep track with Elizabeth and Philip's marriage, Philip coming to terms with the fact that he's prince consort, with Margaret's love life, with the upbringing of Prince Charles. We get to see what Edward VIII and Welly Simpson are up to, and we also get an idea of the private lives of two of the prime ministers that came after Winston Churchill, Anthony Eden and Harold Macmillan. But of course at the center of it all, we get to learn so much more about Queen Elizabeth II, and we get these different approaches of her from the point of view of a mother, of a sovereign, of a wife, of a sister, a daughter, and well, a real human being. Last year, I gave The Crown a 9 out of 5 stars review, and if I'm honest, Season 2 was just as good. Sure, nothing is perfect and it has its flaws, but for me it was just amazing. If I had to choose, I would have to go for season 1, but only because I was so captivated by the Peter Townsend Mrs. Margaret affair, and we didn't really have that much of it in season 2, but that's not the series' fault, that's just how historical events developed. So yeah, maybe that's a bit selfish of me, but in the end, that would be the only reason why I prefer season 1. But yeah, I loved season 2. I watched it in less than a day, and then I watched it again in less than a week. If you're interested in history period dramas, love, war, family sagas, politics, I recommend it. The Crown is like a good marriage. In season 1, you get all the excitement because everything is new. You just can't believe how good it is. And then with season 2, it's like 10 years after the wedding. You know what to expect. You know you won't be disappointed. You know that it's still going to be a really good marriage. That's The Crown for me. Moving along, as I said, I am a history lover, but I'm not that familiarized with what happens after World War II. And so watching The Crown season 2 was like this really cool history lesson that made me aware of just how detailed and researched the show must be, because I didn't know what was gonna happen next at some point. Even though it's not 100% accurate and maybe it diverges from history to create more emotion and drama for television's sake, in the end, it just has such a nice balance between world events and public events for royals and their private lives, and it's all so easy to understand, and I could relate to so many of the characters. It's this beautiful high budget production with amazing settings, lovely costumes, engrossing scripts, and top-notch performances. And then there were all of these little details that just made me fall for the show even more. For example, it was amazing that we saw how much Tommy Lascelles, the Queen's former private secretary, enjoyed recreating historical battles with these little toys. I already knew that Queen's grandfather, George V, really enjoyed as well doing this hobby, and we learned in The Crown that he gave this toy set to Lascelles. It was just a nice reference. And talking about private secretaries, I just loved how much excitement and tension and drama there is into being one for the royal household. I think I would like to be one. And well, anyways, other details would be the Queen's reaction when they have to start having modern parties at Buckingham Palace. I love the brief scene where Jared Harris returns as George VI and John Lithgow returns as Winston Churchill. And even though it would have been really cool to have them in more scenes, I understand why they just want to leave those characters behind and move forward to focus on the ones that come after them. There was also this scene with Queen hunting at Balmoral, and then she's called back to London because there's this constitutional crisis, and that just reminded me so much of the same thing happening later on in the movie The Queen, like a nice nod maybe from Peter Morgan. And then that made me remember all of the prime ministers that will come after Queen Elizabeth up until around the 90s with Tony Blair, for example. And then when we were having Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth meeting the Kennedys, it was really cool, but also it reminded me of these things that Claire Foy said about Queen Elizabeth. For example, there is no one alive today who has met more heads of state, more politicians, more people of the arts, or anything than her, heads of religion than her. There is no one with her set of skills and her knowledge of those people. It's extraordinary. And then when we have Prince Philip going on these world tours, it reminded me how in 2017 he sort of retired from doing them because he's really old now. But that made me think about the man full of life he once was and how age catches up on us all. And maybe some of the events portrayed in The Crown maybe feel ancient to some, but in the end the people in the thick of it all are still alive today. It's not just like a memory from Queen Victoria's time that we're watching. Anyways, moving on, another detail that I really liked was that I had no idea how much of a big thing it was for the Queen to start giving her Christmas speeches on television. That whole 5th episode about how the monarchy has to adapt to survive. It was really heart-wrenching. And I remember that when Prince Charles and Princess Anne were in their late teens, the royal family had to invite the BBC. It was just like the Queen Mother said to her daughter in that episode at the end. That bittersweet passage about how monarchy has to give away more and more of their values and their selves as time goes by in order to survive, until they become these puppets or empty vessels and then they may vanish. I hope not. Now, I think I would like to give you a review of what I thought about some of the main characters. For example, Louis Mountbatten or Uncle Dickie. Last year, I only knew that he was the man who gave up India and that he was an uncle to Prince Philip, who wanted to have the Windsor name changed into that of his family. But then I saw a documentary detailing how close he was to Prince Charles and how maybe in a way if he hadn't died before he did, Princess Diana wouldn't have been Princess Charles' choice to marry marry. Anyways, as I was reading some biographies, I learned that he had been also a close friend to Edward VIII when they were both young because they were cousins. And then when he abdicated, he changed sides into becoming a friend of George VI's family. But now, in the second season of The Crown, we learn more about his marriage and then about how he started becoming a sort of father figure for Prince Charles. And I think this was really good because it just adds layers to the character, to the real person that he once was. And then that passage where Greg Wise is playing him and Claire Foy is playing the Queen, and he tells her about how even though their spouses are wild and stuff, how boring life would be without them. That was really like such an insight into that man's frame of mind, and maybe that of the Queen as well up to a point. Prince Charles. As I said in my review of season 1, I feel Prince Charles is a very misunderstood man, but I hope this idea of him starts to change as this stuff from his childhood and teenage years and early adult years comes back into the spotlight. How his parents were absent for a lot of his childhood, how his personality didn't fit with that of his father, which caused them both a lot of pain and trouble because he was raised in an environment that wasn't the best suited for his character. Anthony Armstrong Jones. Okay, so you have to bear in mind that I am Team Peter Townsend all the way, and even if this may seem unjust, I was ready to hate Anthony from stuff that I've already learned about him and his marriage to Margaret previous to watching the second season, and so that added to my dislike of his character. I thought he was cocky, and I hope that in real life the royal family regretted not having Peter Townsend as the one who married Margaret. I personally didn't like this unconventional love story between him and Margaret, nor about how he kept teasing her up for liking old-fashioned men like Peter. And I don't think I even liked the fact that she was so willingly causing secrets between her and Peter in a way with him. I'm sure Tony may represent the future and this sort of whole new exciting world for Margaret. Thankfully, it was clear that a part of Margaret's heart will always belong to Peter. I personally wouldn't like to have Tony as my boyfriend, husband, whatever. So maybe that's again influencing me and blocking me from appreciating the good qualities of his character. And also I just wish that they had shown us Peter watching Margaret's wedding, like in just brief scene in episode 7. But anyways, at first I was disappointed that Tony apparently married Margaret because he wanted to prove something to his mother. I was like, okay, so all that talk about hating monarchy and being modern and hating marriage, you'll just sell yourself and discard that because you want to prove something to your mother. But in retrospective, it's actually quite telling of his character. But yeah, anyways, I thought they were gonna show us way more of Margaret's marriage to Tony. In a way, it's harmful for them and for the character developments, because we're not seeing how they got from point A to point B, but I also didn't really want to see more of their marriage. So I was glad of that. We'll probably get tons of it in later seasons, how it fell apart. But also, poor Margaret. I mean, here she is at last getting married to a man she thinks will not harm her. A man who is regretting marrying her apparently since before entering the church. And then when we next see him, he hasn't even given her a chance. He just wants to spend time away from his home. And then that last scene with them two together where he's rolling his eyes at her before Prince Philip, God give me patience with her. It's oh my, why did you marry her? Just to ruin her life more than it already was? Again, not that Margaret was blameless, and if they had shown more of their marriage, maybe we would have more things to back up why he's behaving like that. And maybe some people think that Margaret is spoiled and deserves such a treatment from her husband. I was so glad that they decided to explore Edward VIII, because not only does Alec Jennings plays him beautifully, superb acting job there for Mr. Jennings, also because I said in my review for season 1, we don't really get to see that much of him in adaptations for the film about what happens after he gives up the throne to Mary Wallis Simpson. I thought it was really important to have us see this mini row between him and his wife, where she's oh, it's so horrible to live with you, and the way he reacts to that. It's so telling of the people they became after being exiles. It just serves to prove, I think, my point that maybe he thought of her as the excuse he had been searching for all of his life that would allow him to give up the crown and the responsibilities of being the king. Not that he didn't enjoy the privileges, but yes, once he marries her, in a way, the fact that they have to stay together when maybe they didn't want to, it's such a twisted ending to the perfect fairy tale romance that maybe the media portrayed them to be before he abdicated. Anyways, in season 1, I mentioned that maybe because David and Wallis didn't have children, they treated their dogs as if they were their kids. And then in season 2, we actually had a scene where they're celebrating the dog's birthday party as if he was actually a boy. And then another thing that I mentioned in my review for season 1 was that he was a Nazi sympathizer, and that I would have liked for Winston Churchill to confront him in this scene with them together about that, because Winston seemed like really fond of Edward VIII after he abdicated and after World War II, but if Winston was the man who brought down Hitler and stuff, why didn't he seem more severe in his treatment to the former monarch? I don't know, maybe there's more to it than that. And then in season 2, they actually expanded quite a lot in episode 6 about David's backstory with the Nazis. I didn't know everything that they actually showed us, but I think it's really important to bear that in mind when looking back those times, because maybe people are times blaming Wally Simpson for what she made Edward do, like giving up the crown or something. But in the end, she influenced the course of history and may have saved the world, because the fact that we had George VI and not Edward VIII during World War II helped bring down the Nazis. But yeah, it was like a masterstroke, that last scene with Edward VIII where he's playing cards and he's giving up the card with the king and picks up the crown with the Joker. That was some pretty amazing storytelling there. Prince Philip thought that the road we saw his character undergo in season 2 was really interesting. He's a complex man, and we got to explore this by seeing him as an unfaithful husband, a resentful prince, not a very understanding father, and yet because we get glimpses into his childhood, and because we see all the ups and downs in his marriage with the Queen, I can't help but like him. He charms me even when I want to hate him. I felt that in part he had so many extramarital affairs so that he could feel like a proper man. After all, his identity had been taken away when he married Queen Elizabeth, so maybe having lovers gave him this sort of sense of control or rebellion against the establishment. I did find him and Elizabeth adorable whenever they were being cute together, and even though I wish he had been a tiny little detail that I wish the show had shown us though was that I think that the prince from Sleeping Beauty, Disney's 1959 version, was called Philip in order to honor Prince Philip, and I would have liked to have seen his reaction to that in The Crown. One thing that really struck me about the royal marriage though was the following. Comparing their introduction and the ending of their marriage in both seasons, how it starts and how it ends, because we really see, for example, how much they've gone through. In season 2, they start in kind of this rocky ground, and then by the ending of the season, they've reached a point where, at least for the present, I don't think that they've ever been as close. I mean, whoa, that last scene between Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth at Scotland where they're fighting and then they make up, it was just so good. Not just acting wise, but what it represented. You compare that scene with the one from the coronation where he's grudgingly declaring himself to be her man of life and limb. It's like, whoa, that's some pretty impressive character development. I'm talking about that scene between the royal couple. Well, Claire Foy does fantastic in every single scene, bearing the weight of it all, similar to the elegant dignity with which the Queen reigns over England and the Commonwealth. I think my favorite acting moment was during the last scene between Philip and her in Scotland. Her facial expressions just blew my mind away just after Philip sees the picture of that ballerina he once had an affair with. We see this triumphant, defiant look on Elizabeth, and then, without notice, something changes in a very subtle way, and she just looks so sad. It was just brilliantly acted. Well, besides Claire Foy's award-winning performance, I think that there is no better way to describe Elizabeth's role in season 2. The way Variety reviewed it by writing that The Crown was a show about a woman preserving at all costs, even when the men she loves most fail her, out of a sense of duty to the future. I just love the Queen and admire her so much, and my love increased by watching her strength, carrying her through all of these troubles that she has to face in every single possible area of her life. She wasn't that good of a mother to her kids, but she was the best mother England could have hoped for in their Queen. 100% dedicated to her people, and yet she has such a depth of feeling that allows her to love her husband since she was 13, while she's feeling resentful towards him. And she's also so smart. I love that The Crown explores this, because she learns of a situation and then she turns it into her advantage. She's courageous, a living legend, and I just pray that she will be with us for a very long time. Not because I wouldn't like to see Charles as a king, but because with her gone, it would be the end of an era. We would miss him even more than we think, this dynamic, wonderful woman and monarch. Before I start telling you my thoughts on the Queen's sister, I want to mention how odd it is to compare how Margaret was not allowed to marry Peter Townsend because he was a divorced man, and how ironic that not only would she get a divorce later on, but how 3 of Elizabeth's children would later on get a divorce themselves. How much things have changed for the royal family, because now it's Prince Harry who's going to marry an American divorced woman, Meghan Markle, and it's like sort of what happened with Edward VIII. It all comes back to the crown's ability to survive and adapt and change along with the times, even though they may not really approve of certain things that they now have to do. I wonder what Margaret would have made of this. But yes, anyways, as to Margaret's character development in season 2, I feel really drawn to protect her flaws, to make her just as human as everyone else, make her vulnerable and reachable. And I just think that the biggest tragedies of her life would be how much she wanted freedom and independence. And she loved maybe even more being a princess and the privileges that brought along, and because she chose the latter, she knew so much unhappiness. And I'm not saying that she's blameless. I'm sure that there's a lot of things that she did knowingly that made her suffer along the way, but still, I was wondering, why was it so hard for her to accept the fact that she wasn't going to marry Peter, as we see in the early episodes of season 2, when her forebears were marrying men that they didn't love, came to the realization that maybe her ancestors were marrying as 16-year-old girls, and Margaret's love affair may have intensified when she was around 19 to 23. So by that time, if she had lived long before, she would have already been married. And so that's one of the reasons, I think, why she coped and reacted to the breakup with Peter Townsend the way she did, because she had more time to get to know and taste this love. And it's not a criticism. I'm sure that many would have reacted the same way or even worse than she did. And the fact that she didn't throw all away for Peter Townsend doesn't mean that she doesn't have courage. I don't know, I just love her sense of hope and her pride. And my favorite scenes with her this season were when she learns that Peter Townsend is getting married, and also when she's drunkenly dancing at the start of an episode, and then in that same episode by the end she's doing like this sexy dance because she's now happy. And Kirby's acting was really good. Really see the development of this character during this particular period of her life, just by having her dance in different frames of mind. And well, before I finish my review, I just want to say some more things about Princess Margaret. I think that when she got married, she sent Peter Townsend the burned letter where they had sort of made their vow never to marry anyone else if they couldn't be together, and I would have liked to have seen that while Peter is watching her getting married on TV. Also, many consider that Peter's second wife resembled Margaret physically. I don't know, that opens this really disturbing maybe door into how one of the reasons he may have been attracted to his second wife was because she reminded him of Margaret. It might have been nice to have someone mention that to Margaret. And then also, his second wife was like 19 or something when they got married, and when Margaret was 19, I think that was when their relationships may have started to turn really romantic or something. And again, I think that maybe his second wife's youth was what attracted him to her too, because he reminded her of Margaret at that particular point in history. Anyways, I believe that for the moment this is all I have to say about the second season of The Crown. Thank you very much for bearing me with it all, for watching my review. But please let me know what you thought of the second season of The Crown, and what you thought about anything that I had to say here, because I would love to talk about this wonderful, beautiful, stunning show with you all. Or not only about the show, but about the royal British family. And in case some of you may not have heard, there will be a season 3. I think that in fact they're planning 6 seasons. Season 3 will air next year. It's going to be really cool to cover around 60 years of Queen Elizabeth's life. And also every 2 seasons the actors will change. So while Claire Foy gave us this beautiful performance of the Queen, she will no longer appear in it anymore, nor will Matt Smith or Vanessa Kirby. The new actress who will play the Queen will be Olivia Colman, and further casting notices have not yet been announced. And some disagree with this decision of recasting, and while I'm not that fond of saying goodbye to these actors, I trust Peter Morgan. While it may be odd at first to adjust to the new actors' portrayals, the people behind the production know what's best for the show. Olivia Colman is a spectacular actress, so I trust season 3 will be just as good. But yes, some events that I would like to watch later on in the series would be Margaret Thatcher becoming Prime Minister, the whole Charles slash Camilla storyline, the revolts in Ireland during the 70s, what happens to Margaret along the way, how the Queen and Prince Philip managed to explore their marriage, William and Harry growing up, just to name a few. Anyways, in the description box below you can find a link to my review for season 1, a link for my reaction to the trailer for season 1, as well as a link to the IMDb page for The Crown. I wish you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. I'm Carrera, the Mental Traveler, and I'll be seeing you soon. Long live the Queen!